Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming back for our first presentation this afternoon. I am so very pleased to introduce Dr. Charles Jubin, or Chuck as I affectionately know him. He is the director of the Research Initiative for Teaching Effectiveness at UCF, where he's been faculty since 1970, teaching research design and statistics. He is also the founding director of the university's Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning. He has been directing the impact evaluation of UCF's distributed learning initiative, examining student and faculty outcomes and the impact of online blended and lecture capture courses since 1996 at his university. He's published numerous articles and his and journals and books and chapters, and his methods for determining psychometric adequacy have been featured in both SPSS and the SAS packages. He's received funding from several governmental and industrial agencies, including Ford, CDC, NSF, and Sloan. Chuck has been lauded and honored with numerous awards for his impact in the field of online teaching and learning. And he's going to talk today with us about one of his projects where he's earned recognition as UCF's university representative to the Rosen Foundation's Tangelo Park and Paramore programs. As mentioned, he has co-authored, co-edited, or contributed to a number of books and chapters on blended learning, including the Handbook of Blended Learning Environments, Educating the Next Generation, Conducting Research in Online and Blended Learning, New Pedagogical Frontiers, and the Blended Learning Research Perspectives 3-volume series, the last of which is about to come out. He has given over 100 presentations on how modern technologies impact learning at universities throughout the US and in numerous countries. And one of those 100 presentations was way back in 2008 when he came in person to the SUNY Seoul Summit, and we were able to have him as a guest speaker at that event. I'm so pleased to welcome him back and to welcome his friend and colleague, Patsy Moskal, who's the director of digital learning impact evaluation in the research initiative for teaching effectiveness at UCF. And I just want to say a very warm welcome and a very warm thank you to you both for coming to the summit this year. Again, Patsy's also been with us once before, and I'll just turn it right over to you, and very much looking forward to hearing what you're going to say.
Thank you, Alex. I really do appreciate that. Was a lovely introduction for both of us. I hope we can live up to that grand sounding kind of thing. It is really great to be back at the SUNY Summit again after all of these years. It is great to be with you. After a decade, I really do wish it could be face-to-face, but unfortunately in these times when you're talking about scale today and we've passed 500,000 deaths that are at least somehow attributed to COVID, I don't know really what to say. I mean, it's an amazing phenomenon in our world today. Thanks again for that, Alex. And I really, really do appreciate it. It's really good to be back at SUNY because I'm a product of SUNY. You know, I went to SUNY Oswego. I went through the community college in New York, and it was really the only way I could get an education. And it was a lovely education and began me. So I am from Oswego. I certainly hope there are some Lakers on this presentation. I would really be, I'm lonely if I don't have my Oswego people with me. I really do have to give our apologies to Michaela and Nancy. Patsy and I work continuously on these presentations, and we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we did that to Michaela this time, and she was very patient with us. She was indeed. We're going to handle questions in this presentation with Patsy doing it in chat, if you don't mind. I'm old, tired, and slow, and when I try to answer questions on the fly, it doesn't work out that well. So Patsy will be handling chat, and she will be giving you a lot of information as we go along. So hopefully we'll have time at the end of this to have some discussion. I hope so, but it's not always guaranteed with me to deal with that. The other kind of thing is when we practice this, it got a little clunky. So I'm going to do the next thing. Michaela's going to run the slides, and I'm going to say next. I apologize for that, but better being clunky and sure than fancy and not so sure of what happens. I don't want this to go down. So I appreciate your forbearance with all of that. So given that, we're going to talk to you about some things today, learning in the digital age, adaptiveness, scarcity, and equity, one of the topics that's dear to my heart. Next. There it is. This is the partnership which generated what I'm going to talk to you about today. It is a partnership among really three entities. UCF, a very large public institution approaching 70,000 students, Realize It, an adaptive learning platform, and Colorado Technical University, which is a for-profit, largely open access for adult online institution. Connie Johnson, the Chief Academic Officer and Provost, Colum Howland, the Principal Digital Learning Scientist there, and Patsy and I got together, and we've been working together for 4 years on a project in terms of collaborative research. And the idea is that we have produced more than any of us could produce individually. So this has been a wonderful partnership. And it strikes me that this is much like what Michael Feldstein is talking about when he talks about the empirical educator. Universities working with what have heretofore been called vendors in a common research interest, which tends to work out well for everyone. And it strikes me that SUNY is very much like this. You are so distributed and provide opportunity to so many people around the state of New York and around the world that these kind of collaborative partnerships are a natural formulation piece for the SUNY network. So I hope you begin to think about that, because I think you can find some really productive things. And we've worked very hard to produce things that we think you will find interesting. Next. Here's what I worry about. I worry about, on occasion, am I a solution looking for a problem? Many of the things I work on, I get excited about, and I say, well, how am I going to imply this? And I would like you to think about that. I would like you to think about, are we a solution looking for a problem? I would like to share with you, before we begin today, what I consider to be some serious problems for the United States of America. Next. It's working. I like the next working. In the United States of America, if you live in the lowest economic quartile, the chance of your going to and receiving a college education is about 9%. You can fiddle with the percentages, but the curve has remained the same forever. And over the last years, the curve has actually gotten worse. It's gotten quite a bit worse, as a matter of fact. The odds against you in that lower quartile are 9-1. Those are terrible odds, just terrible, terrible odds. If you live in the upper quartile in this country, the odds of you going to and getting a college education are 3-1 in favor. I believe in my heart of hearts that the talent pool in our underserved communities in the United States of America are as deep as any other gated community in the country. What the problem is then, I sincerely believe that we are wasting millions of perfectly good minds in this country. And I don't think we can afford to do it much longer. I really don't think we can continue down that road. We're in a new transitional period in the United States with Black Lives Matter. We need to start reading people like Isabel Wilkerson, Ibram Kendi, Keisha Brand, Heather McGee, Rua Benjamin, who are beginning to talk about the fact that we really must empower our underserved neighborhoods. Opportunity can no longer be viewed as a zero-sum game. If our lowest and poorest among us rise, we all rise. Things really do have to change. I believe this is a serious problem. I think all of us have a responsibility to begin to attend to this. I am doing my best, and I hope we all can do the same. Next. Here's another one. Student debt. The current student debt in the United States of America, total, as of today, is $1.56 trillion. Wrap your head around that. I can't even wrap my head around how much money that is. If that were a GDP, that would be the 13th largest economy in the world. It's mind-boggling to me. It is absolutely mind-boggling. Student debt is crippling generations of people in the United States, and it continues and it continues and continues. Next. And this is the share of student debt held by people in various income levels. Do you see what's happening here? The people who can least afford to pay back their college debt are the ones who borrow the most, the largest proportion of it. If you look at this, it is not too far off from the predatory loans that the banks foisted on underserved communities in the United States before the 2008 crash. What did banks do? They went to redlined communities. They pressured them into taking subprime loans. Subprime loans are tremendously expensive mortgages that people in those communities could well afford the easier rates of prime loans. They forced them into taking these subprime loans. They thought they were getting a good deal. What the banks were doing is stripping the equity out of the houses of these people. These student debts are doing the same thing. It is absolutely stripping their chance of financial success. It is amazing to me. It's like, one of the greatest quotes I've ever heard is, healthcare in the United States has robbed the American dream. Okay, next, please. Well, anyway, those are two problems. There's actually one more, and Patsy and I went back and forth. There's an article in the Scientific American by Bruce Bagasian called The Inescapable Casino. And Bagasian makes the point that in a free market economy, without redistribution of funds and accounting for the wealth advantage in a free market society, resources will always flow from the poor to the rich. And that's really an interesting piece without redistribution and compensating for it. It has something to do with a model called the yard sale model that I can't get into today, but if you'd like to discuss it at some time, I'd be happy to discuss with you the yard sale model in education. Adaptive learning. Adaptive learning really does do three things. It personalizes the educational experience, makes it not the same for everyone. It personalizes it. It customizes the content, and it assesses continuously. One of the interesting things about adaptive learning, what it has really done, it made assessment of student outcomes become part of the instructional paradigm. And it's really interesting how that has played out. We have been doing that, and I here to warn you, there is some pushback in various sources about adaptive learning. One from the Edinburgh people in the manifesto of online teaching, and a couple of other places. And we can talk about that later if we have time. Next. Here's the model. People say adaptive learning is new. It is not new at all. Adaptive learning really, from my perspective, began in 1963 in an article written by John Carroll called A Model of School Learning. And what he basically said was the degree of learning is a function of two things: time spent versus time needed. This is the fundamental equation for adaptive learning. This is it. Now, we have played off this and we've used this, and you really need to read this article if you haven't looked at it. It is really a good piece. I have been a runner all of my life. I have run races way back since I can remember. And I'll say this to you. Road races are adaptive. Pretty much everybody finishes a road race. They finish. What is the variable? The variable is your time. Everybody finishes, but we all finish at different times. If we ran a road race like we run higher education, like we ran a semester, we'd run a half marathon, and the road race organizers would say, you have an hour and a half to finish this. This is the race. It's run like a semester. That's it. We're going to begin it and it's going to end. So Chuck starts running and he runs for his hour and a half and he's only halfway through. What does Chuck get? Half a medal? Half a t-shirt? If you give me the time I need, that's adaptive. I may be the slowest guy in the race and that old truck with the light is following me, but by damn, I'm going to finish that race. If you stop it during time, like we stop a semester, what people are learning is going to be different. The fundamental principle of why you try to do adaptive learning. Next. Here's UCF. Here's our college algebra 1 course. The non-success in our course is 41%. 40%, if I took a student at random and took them out of Algebra 1 and tried to guess without knowing anything about them, the best guess is a little better than even that they would pass the course. That's horrendous. That is absolutely horrendous, okay? It's a little better than even. That really can't be acceptable. That really can't be acceptable in terms of what we're trying to do. So we're trying to figure out this business of analytics. And we're trying to figure it out looking at two variable domains. And one is the old-fashioned student information system, the thing that we worked in for years, and something that the Realize It platform that I referred to provides for us. Real-time class variables. Variables being generated about students in class, that's adaptive, in Algebra 1, real-time. Two different sets of variables. And we're wondering, is there a way we could coalesce them? Is there a way we could put them together to develop a system of analytics in an adaptive learning course that would help us help students be more successful? Next. Here's the suite of variables provided by Realize It to our instructors, to us, real time in the course. There's a lot of them. They come out, they're indexed instantly as students participate in the course. They have to do, in a general sense, with the status of a student in the course, where they are. Where is this student at any particular time in this course? Are they engaged? And I'm going to talk to you today about engagement. Are they really engaged in the course? Are they growing? Are they making progress in the course? And if so, how much and where? And what was their baseline status? Where were they at the beginning of this road race? This configuration of variables gets to us real time, all the time, so that we can index students' status, engagement, growth, and distance from the baseline real time. This is the other suite of variables. So conceptualize this. The SIS variables, GPA, SAT, ACT, high school GPA, demographics, the stuff that's always there, and this variable set that's updating all the time. Next. If you do this, if you let those two variable sets duke it out in a classification and regression tree, you throw them in there and you let them fight it out. One variable will always win. It will always win. That variable is GPA, their grade point average at UCF. It will always win. It will dominate. And then you run your analytics system and you say, oh, GPA is the best predictor of success. Well, there's nothing I can do about academic history. That's what it's a measure, but there is. Supposing I declassify it, supposing I break it down into quartiles, you will find this, that those students in the lowest GPA quartile have a 26% chance of passing college algebra. Those students in the upper quartile have an 88% chance of passing algebra. Those students in that lower quartile have virtually no chance of passing algebra. All is lost. Or is it? Or is it? What I'm saying to you, there is a 3-to-1 odds against them for passing algebra. Those in the middle are close to that 41%. And you can't do anything about it, but maybe you can. What then if after you've done this, you factor it out and use this as a mediating variable? Look at those 4 groups in the context of the variables that are being generated by Realize It, the real-time variables. Next. Here is a decision rule. So now, supposing we look at those students who are in that 4th GPA quartile, the top students, and we begin to look at those variables in that updated set that begin to predict. So if a student is in the upper GPA quartile and they're in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th quartile of number of things that they have revised in the course, which we can index, their chance of non-success goes down from 12%, which it was, to only 7%. These students have a virtual lock on passing Algebra 1. Do you need to do anything with them as far as analytics is concerned? No, leave them alone. There's nothing you need to do with them. On the other hand, next, if we look at those students who are in quartile 1 with a 74% chance of not passing algebra, and we then coalesce them with 2 variables from the updated variable set. That is, if they are in quartile 2, 3, or 4, a number of revisions like before, and in the proper use of time in the course and amount of time they remain in the course, using the course, they're in quartile 4, then their chance of non-success goes down from 74% to 39%. I have just changed their odds of non-success from 3-to-1 against them succeeding to better than average of passing. It's the best I can do. But for these students, it is a damn good deal. It is a very good deal because I have greatly increased their odds of passing. Well, how can I do this? Number revised and total time use of time are two variables which are very, very responsive to instruction. We can teach students how to revise. We can teach students how to use time properly. And if we do this, and we are integrating it into our algebra course now, we greatly increase their chances of doing this. This, I think, is the best you can do with analytics. The idea of predicting one-to-one students, I don't think is really going to pan out, but we're really, really pleased with this model because we're already seeing its impact on our students. Students who thought they were for sure going to fail algebra are now saying, I have a good chance of getting there, of passing algebra. Okay, next. And the students in the middle, who were basically in the middle of this kind of thing, basically where the courses are, you can actually reduce by using these two variables, this same model, you can reduce their chance of non-success by 11 or 12%. So what have I showed you here today? Next. This. Look at this. This is the predictive lift and gains lift that you get from this model. You gain 35% in the lowest group. You gain 15% in the middle group, and you gain 8% in the highest group. You gain the least where you need it the least. You gain the most where you need it the most. You want to concentrate on the students who are very much at risk. These students usually come in with deficits that they've accumulated over years, over the yard sale model. If you look at the two curves I showed you, beginning about chances of success with low income quartiles and chances of success with low GPA quartiles, and if you fit them over each other, they fit exactly. There's a real correspondence between those two, and you actually know what it is. Next. Student engagement is a three-headed monster. Next. There they are. There are the three monsters. If you're a fan of Dante Alighieri, you know, the Divine Comedy, things come in threes, and they are behavior, knowledge, and affect. How are students behaving in a course? What are they doing? We can follow that in the Realize It course. What are they learning? We can follow it. And what is their affect? How are they responding to this course? Let's look at behavior next. Well, let's look at student behaviors. We have a psychology class at UCF that has become completely adaptive. Jeff Cassisi taught the course for several semesters, wasn't comfortable making it completely adaptive, letting students go at their own pace. So what he finally did is he said, okay, I worked it into an adaptive course. I am going to let it be completely adaptive. You are to go at your own pace. I will be there to help you. I will do whatever I can to help you get through this course, but I am going to let you be in charge of your learning. So let's go to the next slide. So what we are going to show you, is students going through a completely adaptive course day by day by day. The horizontal axis of what we are going to show you is simply activities in the course. Number of things that they've done in the course. Could be anything. Review, time, doing a module, taking a test, doing an activity, revising, practicing, discussing, any activity in the course, anything they do. On the vertical axis is their progress toward completing all of the modules in the course. They're going to be, and you're going to be looking at the trajectory of a number of students going through an adaptive learning course. Michaela, will you press our go button? Here they go. See if you can discern a pattern of students going through an adaptive learning course. I don't know if you can see it, but there are patterns underlying it. Watch what transpires. Here's one. Here's two. Here's three. Here's four. Cullum Hallam named them after animals: rabbits, turtles, frogs, and kangaroos. There goes a rabbit. Finish the course. Here go the frog and the tortoise. The tortoise is going, inching up. The frog is going week by week by week through the course. And watch for the kangaroo. They haven't done a thing yet. And there they go. Finish the course. 4 distinct patterns going through this course. The rabbit finished the course almost immediately. Got into the course, said, what do I have to do? Okay. How much time do I have to do it? And they were done. Okay. The frog went through week by week by week, just like they would do in a semester. Tortoise inched their way through the course, but completed. And the kangaroo waited and waited and waited and waited and finished the course very quickly at the end of the course. And notice he or she did more activities in the course than anyone else. It's an interesting sort of phenomenon. And we're beginning to look at this over and over and over again in courses to see if this plays out. I would say to you today that maybe we ought to have a chat with all those people who have been trashing learning styles for all of those years. Maybe there is something as some kind of a behavioral learning style that would give us some kind of information for doing this. We look at these and we say, ooh, you know, the kangaroo doesn't really conform to learning theory very well. And the rabbit, well, he or she completed the course way too quickly. So I think maybe we need to go back and revisit these kinds of things. So this is something we're looking at in our adaptive learning courses, and I hope it's something you may want to get involved in as we go on through the courses. Okay, yeah, okay. All right, now let's move on to a new topic, equity. All right, here we are. 30 years ago, if you were in a high-end hotel at Disney World and you needed to make a drug buy, and you were in that hotel and you looked at a bellhop, and the bellhop looked like they had the look. The bellhop looked like, well, I think if I asked this guy, he would send me to some place where I could make a drug buy. What he would do is he would send you to a community that was tucked in behind International Drive in Orlando, called Tangelo Park. And you could go to Tangelo Park and you could stop on any corner and a drug dealer would come out and sell you whatever you wanted. Tangelo Park was a dangerous, dangerous community. Crime, drug dealers, discouragement, no hope, terrible high school graduation rate, very high dropout rate, no motivation, a community with very, very, very little hope. Just really a community that was struggling. Bob Allen, the principal of the elementary school, told his teachers every day, go home immediately after school. Do not stay in this community. Every morning, Bob would get up early with his staff. He would police the playground, looking for drug paraphernalia, weapons, stolen cars, which were there. And every day he could watch drug deals going down out of his window. There was simply no hope in this community. Tangelo Park represented so many communities in this country that it is just heartbreaking. There was no hope. There simply was no hope in this community. And there was no way for any of the citizens to see any hope for themselves or their children. Next. Then came along this man. You see the white-haired gentleman sitting here. His name is Harris Rosen. Harris Rosen is a philanthropist for the New World. He is a hotelier in the Orlando area, one of the greatest benefactors of UCF. He owns 8 hotels in the Orlando area. He's given back to the community in any number of ways. What he decided to do was to adapt Tangelo Park. 30 years ago, he met with people throughout the community and he said, what can I do? How can I help a community? And he was led to Tangelo Park. And he partnered with this community and he began to help. And I don't mean he helped this community. He helped this community help itself. He empowered the community. And here's what he did next. In this community, what he did is this. From day one, 30 years ago, every two-year-old child in Tangelo Park now has the opportunity to begin a quality preschool education at 2 years of age, free of charge in Tangelo Park, as long as the community exists. A quality education beginning at 2 years of age. What we did originally is we established in 10 homes in Tangelo Park, trained residents who were interested in doing it for 6 children in those homes, an early childhood education programs. Got them certified, retrofitted the homes, put a room in as a classroom, and every day, these students went to school, began learning knowledge, executive function, social emotional skills at 2 years of age. Through 3 years of age, they go on to voluntary pre-kindergarten in the public schools at 4. If they couldn't get in or were full, we would keep them at 4. They would enter kindergarten from our early childhood program, ready for kindergarten and reading. Can you imagine what it would be like for a child to enter kindergarten with none of the skills that we give them? It's like you and I going into quantum physics. There's no hope. At least for me, there's no hope in terms of doing this. Then what we did as these children, working with their parents and this community went through public schools because we are a believer in public schools, support all the way through elementary school, all the way through middle school, all the way through high school, with a counselor in high school from the Tangelo community for these students that work with them all the way through Dr. Phillips High School to ensure that they graduated from high school, and upon graduation, upon their acceptance to a public four-year university, a community college in Florida, a vocational school, a skills preparation school, they would receive full scholarships to these institutions: room, board, tuition, books, and expenses. They would leave their post-secondary education debt-free, not owing a penny, not a dime, not a dime. And that this program would go on as long as the community exists. Every student in Tangelo Park is born with a legacy of a college scholarship paid for, absolutely paid for. We ran for our parents a parent leadership program, teaching them how to be advocates for their children, to understand the lingo and the jargon of public schools, how to negotiate on behalf of their children, not go in and confront, but negotiate. Parents, we say, if someone would say regarding one of our Tangelo students, well, we'd like to put this student in a special education class. The parents would go in, they've been trained, said, oh, let us look at their IEP. Let us look together at this so we can see why exactly you're doing this and doing this. And after 30 years, we have an alumni association of graduates from Tangelo Park, of graduates from Tangelo Park who work with our community. And it has been a remarkable turnaround in this community. At the moment, I am undertaking an intergenerational impact study of this program, knowing full well not only has it impacted those students who have graduated from college, after 30 years, it's impacted their children and their grandchildren. It's had made their lives better, much better. This is a remarkable, remarkable program. Next. Here's the preschool. Here's an actual preschool in Tangelo Park with a teacher and a teacher's aide. These are the kids. These are the kids. Look at these kids. Look at them. Look at what they're learning. This is their classroom. Since it's been 30 years, all of the teachers you see in the background, they've all aged out. So we've put in facilities now. We've actually put in a preschool in Tangelo Park, and we put one in another community, Paramore. We're doing another community in Paramore and the downtown area. But every year, these students graduate from preschool. And Harris Rosen and I go, and we have a graduation ceremony. These students have a cap and gown. They have a mortarboard, they have a tassel, they go through a graduation. We invite them to move their tassel from the right to the left. And we tell them this is the first of many graduations you're going to experience in your lifetime. The whole community comes. The whole community comes to watch this graduation ceremony. You should come. When this pandemic is over, I cordially invite you to come to Tangelo and see what's going on in this community. Next. Here's what we've achieved over 30 years. In Tangelo Park, if there had been no Rosen Foundation program, if there had been none, the expectation of college graduates, I showed you. I've got 45 here, but that's an overestimate because that's the estimate with the Tangelo program. The estimate would have been more like 30 college graduates. We've produced 160 college graduates. Can you imagine? 160 college graduates from this community. 4 or 5 times the national expectation. We have produced 227 college degrees, and you can see what we've done. This is the correct metrics for measuring outcomes. The typical bureaucratic metric is how many graduated from high school, how many went to college, how many graduated, divide. It's the wrong metric. This is the right metric. This is the right metric. We have so increased the odds of graduation. We have increased the odds of college graduation in this community from 9-1 against to 3-1 in favor. It has been a remarkable, remarkable turnaround. Next. Here are the crime rates in Tangelo. Crime is down 78%. 78%. The sheriff, who is now the mayor of Orange County, Jerry Demings, said that Orange to Tangelo Park now is a quiet oasis of crime. It has gone down to virtually no violent crime in this community. And look at the beginning of this. Look at the beginning. There was no change virtually in crime for the first 5 years. One of the things you begin to learn is that if you're going to do these kinds of things, you have to stay the course. You have to stay the course. You're in for the long haul. I'll talk to you about that a little bit as we get closer to the end of this presentation. Next. Here then is the percentage of students graduating from college carrying debt. It is mind-boggling, mind-boggling. The vast majority of students who graduate from post-secondary education in this country carry debt. Tangelo students carry zero debt, absolute zero debt. None whatsoever. Next. Okay. If you ever worked with me, you know there will be reading assignments. And here are 4 reading assignments for you. These are 4 books that I highly recommend. Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. It's her newest book that talks about what we have done to build a caste society and systematically deny equal opportunity. Scarcity by Mulanathan and Schaefer, in terms of what students have to undergo in an underserved community. Okay. Skin in the Game by Nassim Nicholas Taleb tells you about what it's like when people do not have the skin in the game. In 2008, the banks didn't have any skin in the game. They simply gave loans and they kept saying that the risk is so atomized that no one's going to have any risk. And this latest book, The Manifesto for Teaching Online. The Manifesto for Teaching Online is a book. Now, I really, really do encourage you to read these books. But here's the deal. You don't have to read them. I prepare notes for all of these books. I prepare the Chuck notes. So if you contact me or you contact Patsy, you can have the Chuck notes. You can review them. And if they're of interest to you, you can go on and read the book. But you're more than welcome to my notes. Now, I've told you about many things. I've told you about our approach to analytics. I've told you about what we've done in Tangelo Park. And now I'm going to tell you that with Tangelo Park, we know it works. We know it's the model. We have approached every foundation. We have approached the richest people in the world. We have approached the National Basketball Association, the National Football Association, telling them, asking them to say, you ought to do a Tangelo Park in every one of your franchise cities. If the National Football League, the National Basketball Association, and the Major League Baseball each did a Tangelo, there would be 189 Tangelos, be 139 Tangelos in the country. We turned the country around. We did some calculations. Cullum Holland did a calculation. If we did the number of tangelos that it costs for one Super Bowl commercial, for a Budweiser beer commercial, we could do 50 tangelos. Okay. If we did the number of tangelos that companies have saved with the current tax breaks, we could do 1,000 tangelos in the country and we could turn the country around. So we have a lot before us. We have to figure out analytics on how to do it right. We have to figure out how to help the students who are struggling in our universities. We have to think about how our universities can transform themselves. We're operating in the area of COVID. We have to figure out how we can operate in this and still provide these students with the opportunity to progress and learn. We're all struggling. We're operating on Zoom today and we're all struggling with Zoom. We have to figure out how to do all of these things. Given that, I think we're making remarkable progress. So at this point, then, we do have a few minutes for questions, if there are any questions. If not, we'll end a little early. Here we are. Here are our contacts. Patsy and I really appreciate the fact that you've listened to us. We hope some of the things we said have been interesting to you, have been worthwhile for you. And of course, when we talk about partnerships, we are always interested in partnering with you or any of your institutions in this wonderful network you call SUNY. You are wonderful people, and you have done everything you possibly can to see that people have an opportunity to achieve a successful higher education. You people are great, and we have nothing but affection for you. Is there any questions we might answer? Or has Patsy handled them all? Now, this is like one of my statistics classes. I extinguish you all.
I was just going to say, Patsy, do you want to unmute yourself? Are there any questions that we should answer out loud?
I saw a question from Peter in the chat. He was asking how many rabbits versus frogs versus kangaroos versus, what was the other one? You know, how many, like, what are the numbers, I guess. Peter, are you there? You want to ask?
Yeah, I was just wondering about. Hi, Chuck. Hi, Patsy. Good to see
Yo,
you
Peter,
guys.
how are you, man? How are you?
Hey, Peter.
Okay. I was just wondering about the stability of those potential learning styles. Since, as you noted, there's been a lot of criticism of learning styles. It seems to be what you're suggesting is that maybe this represents evidence that learning styles are not a fake thing, but a real thing. And
Well, yeah, that's a good question, Peter. I don't know if I know the answer to that, but the answer to your question is the rabbit, the hare, and the tortoise really dominated. There was only one kangaroo.
okay.
There was one kangaroo. So the question is this a learning style? Are kangaroos unique to themselves? And you raise a very good question. The question is, do the stabilities of these that we found in psychology, do they hold up in differential equations? You know, and that is a question we've got to research, Peter, in terms of whether they do this. And now Cullum has done a lot of really great research, and I wish he could have been with us today in terms of showing that the fact that there are patterns of successful and unsuccessful learning styles in adaptive courses. We've got a long way to go to this. And like always, Peter, you ask very penetrating questions.
And you provide very insightful answers, Chuck. Thanks very much for the great presentation today to both of you and to Patsy.
Well, we really love SUNY, and I hope when we get through this pandemic, we can find an answer to these kinds of questions, because, you know, I just worry about the fact that our students who are behind are getting further and further behind.
I saw another question, Chuck and Patsy, in the chat. It was from Ruru. And Patsy, maybe you already responded, but I just wanted to get to see if he or if they wanted to ask their question. It had to do with learner community in the case in the case that you were talking about at the time, and do they engage with each other? I don't remember when in the presentation they were talking, and it does look like Patsy did respond, but Ruru, did you want to open your mic and say anything more on that?
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah. No, I was just curious in that sort of adaptive learning course if, I mean, one of the things we try to encourage in terms of student engagement is students engaging with each other and learning together and learning from each other. And so I was just wondering in the adaptive learning course how that worked out.
Well, that's a very interesting question and a good question. We were talking, Harris and I were talking to the Foliger Foundation this morning. And one of the encouraging kind of things is this is the foundation who might really, we're talking about Tangelo, who really might be interested in going in for 3 decades, which is not a foundational style, but that's a different topic. The engagement thing takes on a lot of, like I said, it's a 3-headed kind of monster. And, it does look different in an adaptive learning course than it say would look in a face-to-face course. And clearly we have a lot of work into looking on what is it a student is doing or being when they're really engaged in a course. So Ru, if you'd like to pursue that with us, we would be more than happy to answer that, because, engagement is really a very slippery kind of thing. Like, how do we know when a student is engaged? Like, looking at that kangaroo, it looks like they were never engaged in the course, and finally they finished it. Now the question is that engagement, or is that entirely something else?
I would follow up on that question, Chuck. This is Peter again, and ask, what do you think is the likely sort of consequences, intended and otherwise, of expansion of adaptive learning, where there's a lot more individualized or individual instruction as opposed to sort of a social dimension to learning? Do you have any concerns about a greatly expanded footprint for adaptive learning?
Yeah, Peter, I think basically it's a train wreck. Because of the implications it has for how we structure our universities. We have a situation at UCF where students take a math placement examination. And if they don't qualify for Algebra 1, they have to take a non-credit bearing intermediate algebra course. And in order to get into Algebra 1, they have to pass that course. And what we've done now with our adaptive learning, actually, Tammy Muse, who is an instructor par excellence, she's begun those 2 courses simultaneously. So students can take, in an adaptive format, they can take intermediate algebra. And as soon as they complete the intermediate algebra, they transfer directly during the same semester to college algebra. And there's a large, or Algebra 1, there's a large cohort of them, not huge, but a large cohort of them who begin late and finish college algebra on time, which is mind-boggling. And then what Tammy Muse does is she negotiates with the registrar to say, these students need 2 extra weeks to finish the course beyond the close of the semester. Can you imagine the hell it raises with the end of semester, Peter? When these students don't close out at the end of the semester, and registering them at the beginning for financial aid. So a wide implementation of adaptive learning really does sort of rattle the structure of semesters and other things that we have in the university. And I think you already foretold that. It really does shake the tree, Peter.
Yeah, it has the potential to be an exercise in efficiency over sort of common humanity and socialization that we expect in higher education. If we see a greatly expanded footprint of adaptive learning, where people are kind of tracked into individualized instruction without a great deal of socialization or some of the social learning that occurs.
Peter, one of the things that we did, actually, because of the isolating nature of, if your entire course is structured in adaptive learning, the student never engages with anyone but the system. So as part of our survey research, we asked them about that. And interestingly, we asked them about interacting with others, and they didn't interact as much but they also didn't want to interact with them as much. So what we do is we make sure that the faculty know that. If you are in a course where interacting with other students or the socialization aspect is important, then there are other elements outside of adaptive learning that the faculty can do. So the course itself is really, the design incorporates not just Realize It, but also within Canvas, anything that you can do within a Canvas course or an online course. And in fact, some of our faculty members use Realize It for the content, but they still are teaching a blended course or even a face-to-face. So we've had faculty with any one of those modalities use adaptive learning. And as you can imagine, faculty are very creative. So there are a lot of permutations on course design and how they're incorporating this within their instruction.
Yeah. And Peter, we have, that's a great answer, Patsy. We have been working together for all of these years, and even we've been doing this, and we started with the Sloan C Consortium. We interacted, and we had all this wonderful, wonderful interaction. And now we're doing this today, and I would rather give a lecture to 5,000 hostile people than do this. Because I wrestled with how do I transfer my persona to this. Every time I do this and I listen to it, I said, God, I suck, and trying to do this. I mean, I just don't have those kinds of things. So when we talk about engagement and questions that Ruask and others have asked, we've got a lot of transitioning to do in terms of, like Patsy said, in terms of trying to blend these formats with what's going to happen in the future. I think we've got a lot of work to do in terms of doing this.
Well, I think I would just close the circle by saying, Chuck, you definitely don't suck.
Oh, wow.
This is awesome today. It's been a great it's a tour de force and great work that you guys have been doing, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else does as well. So thank you.
Well, we so appreciate the invitation to be with our Sony friends. It's really great. Like we have been together for so long and worked so hard on so many problems, and we have inherited a really unanticipated negative side effect with this COVID things, that as we begin to work this out of it, I'm just hoping that we're stronger and better when we come out of this.
Thank you so much, Chuck and Patsy. And I want to echo what Peter said, that you definitely do not suck. It was really wonderful.
That's always what we aspire to, Alex. That's
exactly
that
right.
is the bar right there. Don't suck.
Yeah, it's like I talk to my daughter about this all the time. My daughter is such a better presenter than I am, and it's like, if I ever get to a presentation where I don't say I'm going to hang it up.
Well, I don't know if Bill Pels is in the room, but he has a habit of whoever's presenting, he counts their ums.
Oh God, no.
And then he'll give you a report at the end of your presentation. So yeah, it's not good. But anyway,
that's a terrible use of analytics. Terrible.
Thank you. Will you please tell him? Yeah, that was a very wonderful, thought-provoking presentation. I so appreciate you and Patsy being here with us today and showing us your work and trying to help us understand how your work gets woven into practice. It was really, really inspiring. And I hope that your Tangelo Park model gets duplicated all over the place. That would be amazing.
So do I.
So we are at 3:00. We're a little bit over. We're rolling right into the next session, which is our open networking and discussion. And so if you guys can hang out and